making so much accessible to the public, because I think that's a really undervalued art form in itself, that kind of lucidity and clarity. And I've written for the Picayune myself years ago when Schwegman still existed. Remember Schwegman's a supermarket? And my editor there said that it should be understood by the people who go to Schwegman's. And I said, but they don't go to art galleries. But I understood that, well, some of them did, but most of them didn't. But there is a sort of a kind of a benchmark at the Picayune. I don't know, maybe it's the people who go to, Walmart, I think would be the closest analogy. But, so I think that's really good, and I think maybe that's what daily paper writers have to do, and I know I'm under some, they give me a lot more freedom at Gambit, though, at least until they squinched my space down to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, but I should say no editor told me that. That just came about naturally, wanting to, becoming aware that I wasn't writing for an art readership. I wasn't writing for somebody who bought a magazine dedicated to art or any of those fantasies that I had in my head. I was writing for everyone who got a paper thrown in their front yard in the morning, and it's a wonderful challenge, to make art understandable without using the jargon that we're familiar with is a wonderful challenge, I think.
No, I agree, it really is.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, but my question is that art criticism? Is a review directed to the general public art criticism? That I put that out there for people to.
I think that the trick here is to be able to have enough innuendo between the lines so that somebody can take it as a literal statement. But on the other hand, there are certain keywords and phrases that are known to the secret powers that control the world.
The MFA words.
Yeah. And so there's ways to do that too. So when you're given very little space, you can somehow clue into these resonances, I like to think of them, and people know at that level what you're talking about, and so it kind of resonates to different people in different ways. And I think it's been a struggle trying to fit things into a little space, but that's kind of like how I thought it should be handled if possible. It's not always easy to do.
Well, you've brought up the guy who's not in the room, the question of editorship, and I've always been curious about this. How much pressure is, and this, I'll open this up to everybody, and of course you write for all different sources. I've seen all of your articles in other papers than the ones we just mentioned tonight. How much pressure is placed on you by the editors to write about specific artists, or perhaps to write favorably, or how much do they direct you in general?
Me, not at all.
No, it works the other way. I tell my editors what's going on. They look to me to look at all the press releases and keep my ear to the rails and know what's going on. So it works the other way. It works the opposite.
Adam?
For instance, in the Saratoga collection writing about now, I'm having to cover 40 artists, so it's not I don't have the pick and choose that perhaps these gentlemen have, so there is that challenge of expanding my scope as a writer and also covering new material. But once it's written, I've never had a great deal of editorial pressure. But I do want to add on to something you asked, and that was the different types of art criticism and art writing. Just like art is no longer one thing, I don't believe that there's any one thing for art criticism. There's a whole bunch of different journals out there. I mean, the writing of art form, there's the theory writing, and there's the pop writing of let's say, whatever, Modern Painters Magazine is not as theoretical. But I do have to kind of point out what Eric does in the Gambit. First of all, in writing in 25 words or less, exactly what's going on to an artist, and being able to deliver to the pedestrian as well as to the art enthusiast. You're able to cross that line and offer to both in as few as words as has ever been written in an art critic's work.
Yeah. She does. Opening up to everybody again, what is important to impart to beginning critical writers? Because I know, Ylva, you're dealing with this quite a bit right now. How can we guide the next generation of voices to everyone?
Well, I think we have to put emphasis on two things. One, I think there's a general misconception that contemporary art somehow is created in a vacuum, that contemporary artists somehow grab the now and create their things, and we know that's not true. There's a lot, and it's important to teach them to look for the background and give them the bibliography, which we also are doing in the critical writing, and then tell them to see. That's the only true way to learn about art, is to see art.
Does journalistic objectivity apply when writing about something that is effectively personal opinion? I love these one-word answers from Eric Bookhardt.
Well, no, I mean, it's not a news story. And, you know, sometimes you do, like the news story, in which case journalistic objectivity does weigh. And there's different degrees, you know, like if you're writing a column, if it's a political column or any other kind of column, you're not supposed to just totally lie about stuff. You know, there has to be some basis for it. But I think it's the difference between reporting facts and putting facts or putting information into some kind of a context. And that's where it gets to be a mixture of the objective and the subjective, because particularly when you're dealing with cultures, and it could be pop, high culture, low culture, whatever, cultures are very much based on collective feelings about things. And this is, I think, the problem with critical theory, because Adam mentioned how theoretical things have become in the last 20, 30 years. And there's, you know, I think a lot of the critical theory people have a lot of important things to say. I'm just not always convinced that visual art is the best way to say it. And I think that, you know, it's much more difficult to make that work in a way that actually moves people. And if you look at a lot of the art that gets hyped around, I mean, a lot of it is kind of devoid of emotional content. Whereas when you look at great art through history, the advantage of being like being an artist, you know, is that you could really have fun and put your heart and soul into things and not just recite theoretical references, you know. Now I think, you know, an example of art that is kind of based on critical theory that works in a way that's beyond merely ironic is like Generic Art Solutions. I think their stuff is hilarious. It's a great social commentary, a great critique, and it's also a great sort of a ironic statement about art history quite often, and critical theory and everything else. I think UNO does a pretty good job with that, but a lot of the stuff I see around the country is just boring. You know, how can they stand it?
Art about other art.
Yeah.
This again is more for the writers, but Ylva and Rashida can weigh in if it is pertinent. Do you write about work that you know to be good even if you don't like it? And if so, how do you cover that?
Okay. I got something to say. That's a hard one. Because lots of times, you know, there's stuff I really don't like. I mean, I just don't like that kind of art. But if somebody does it really, really well within that genre, you have to say so. It's your job, you know. And I know Doug doesn't always like minimalist art, but I think that I do kind of like minimalist art. But I mean, it shouldn't be what we like. It really has to be more about how well are they doing it. Because you know that if it's there, if it's gotten all this historical attention, if it's part of the history books, if it's in museums, if all museums are based on it,